Welcome to another segment of the First Coast Black Nurses Association Mental Health for Health Professionals. We are excited to be here today with you, and I'm excited for you guys to meet our speaker today, Dr. Dewan. Dr. Nick Dewan from Florida Blue. We also would like to say thank you to Florida Blue and Dedicated Medical for being the sponsors of our event. Without you, this would not be possible. Thank you. Right now, I want you guys to sit back, relax, and listen to a beautiful bio of Dr. Dewan.
Our speaker today is Dr. Nick Dewan, the Vice President of Behavioral Health at GuideWell on Florida Blue. Nick Dewan, MD, serves as Vice President of Behavioral Health. In this role, which he assumed in June 2020, he is responsible for creating a cross-functional team that designs and implements the enterprise's behavioral health strategy for all insurance segments. This includes creating new value-based reimbursement models and new roles in the care delivery system, as well as a broad view of behavioral health across demographics and specific points of care. Additionally, he participates on the enterprise's Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee and serves as chair of both the Behavioral Health Steering Committee and the Opioid Task Force. Dr. Dewan is an accomplished physician and executive with a proven track record in health systems operations. Prior to joining GuideWell on Florida Blue, he was Chief Medical Officer of Behavioral Health for Baycare Health System. In this role, he oversaw operations in 15 hospitals and ambulatory programs in 5 counties across West Central Florida and supervised a large team that included physicians, psychologists, advanced care nurses, program managers, and support staff. In his more than 25 years of experience, Dr. Dewan has been a pioneer and innovator in behavioral health services and technology. He has served in a variety of clinical and administrative positions, including 10 years in private practice. Among other roles, he served as medical director for Turning Point of Tampa, a residential treatment facility for eating disorders, substance abuse, and co-occurring psychiatric illness, and as medical director of psychiatry for Sylvan Healthcare, a nursing rehabilitation and long-term care facility. He is also the founder of the Center for Mental Health Care Improvement and served as its president for 7 years. Additionally, Dr. Dewan played and coached tennis at the collegiate level and has worked with amateur and professional athletes around the world in multiple sports, including tennis, golf, football, baseball, basketball, and soccer. Throughout his career, Dr. Dewan has been active in community and professional organizations. He currently serves on the board of Positive Coaching Alliance Tampa Bay and is a past board member of Eckhart Youth Alternatives, now Eckhart Connects. Additionally, he is an affiliate professor of psychiatry at the University of South Florida. Dr. Dewan holds a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Wright State University and a Doctor of Medicine from Medical College of Ohio at Toledo. He spent 3 years in psychiatric residency at the University of Southern California and completed his residency and fellowship in psychiatry epidemiology at the University of California, San Diego. He is a certified physician, executive, and is board certified in psychiatry and addiction medicine.
It's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. I was asked to give a talk on what do we do now, and so that's actually the title of my talk. And if I could have the first slide shown, so I can share with you where do we go from here. And as you can see on the first slide, it's let's face it. We have 7.8 billion people in the world that have lived through a common experience. It's never happened before. It's never happened in our time period. We know pandemics occur well, at least a century ago. But the world has never been this interconnected. It's never been this sort of digitally connected or connected in other ways than it is now. And so here we are. What do we do now? Where do we go? How do we go in healthcare? How do we go from the trauma and the stress and the burden and the all the events of COVID and all the other events in society to a place of hope? And so that's what I'm going to try to do in the next 15 to 20 minutes. And then we'll have some questions and answers. And hopefully, we'll have a very fruitful dialogue today. But what do we do now? And so let's go to the next slide. So, as you can see, this is a slide of two massive mountains. This is a situation when we think about what we've been through, what healthcare has been through, what nurses have been through. I think nurses are the real heroes here. Nurses are the front line. They're not only the front line, they've been the caregivers, the healers, the supporters, the hand holders. They've been everything to people who have suffered, and they've been supportive of each other. And so this is one of the few times in history where we have this concept of prolonged stress. And when I talk about prolonged stress, I'm talking about prolonged traumatic stress. This sense of constant fear, anticipation, hypervigilance takes a toll on the body and mind. And it's been going on for over a year. You combine that with not only the grief of seeing people lose their lives, and perhaps it's not directly seeing people lose their lives in clinical settings, but knowing people that have lost their lives, having a loved one, having a coworker, having a neighbor, somebody you know. This is one of the few times where there's somebody that you know that maybe had a family member, that maybe had a friend who passed away. And at the same time, people's lives change. The loss of, say, people that worked in, say, office settings had to work from home. If you're in a clinical setting, you had to gown up, mask up. You had to do different things. There was a loss of that sort of collaboration or the loss of connectivity with patients. I mean, people that are going into the healing professions, part of the joy is being able to connect, being able to see someone, being able to share yourself of with them. And so there's a grief in terms of the loss of your own sense of professional identity, the grief in terms of seeing the loss of others, and this prolonged stress. So it's this hyperadrenalism, hypercortisol state with this sort of depressed state. And for some people weathered the storm. They kept strong through it. And now here we are coming out on this other side of the mountain to a new mountain. And there might be some delayed grief. You might have had to be strong. You might have had to be, the courageous one, the caretaker, the person who makes the home life fine, the person who makes the work life fine, the person who's the parent, the person who's the son or daughter. You're the one that had to be strong through all of this. And now the delayed grief, the delayed stress can happen. So these are the things that healthcare professionals and especially nurses have to really be cognizant of is this going on? And how do I manage this? What do I do? I understand the adrenaline, the cortisol, the grief, the stress, the prolonged trauma, um, the prolonged experience of hypervigilance. Now what? So let's go to the next slide, and I'll walk you through what I think are some practical, straightforward, easy things that you can think about as you move forward. And so I'll start, I use this puzzle framework because it is a puzzle. What are we going to do? And so the blue, let's start with the blue. When I use the word rest, it doesn't just mean physical rest. Everybody talks about, are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough rest? That's a portion of the day. When I talk about rest, it means two things. It means rest during the day, meaning even 5-minute breaks every hour, even 5-minute breaks every 2 hours, resting the body. It's not only resting the body, but resting the mind. And a lot of healthcare organizations have taken upon themselves to do that mental rest during the day. Take a few breaths, take some fresh air, but rest the mind. When in a hyper stress, hyper adrenaline situation, hyper cortisol situation, it's so important to rest the mind because too much of that can create long-term uh, impact to people's emotional sort of balance, their cognitive health. And so rest is critical. And as we move forward, rest will continue to be critical because of that prolonged stress or the delayed grief or the delayed stress. Resting the mind and resting the body are critical, not just, say, end of the day, but throughout the day. The next thing I want to talk about is, although I talked about rest, I also put activation up there. Now, what I mean by that is activating means activating things that bring you joy. Doing things that bring you joy, whether it's looking at the stars at night, whether it's taking a walk, whether it's listening to music, whether it's calling a friend, but might be reading, might be watching a show. Whatever that joy is, it's important to schedule it. It's important to put it in the calendar. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, I'll get to it. I'll do with it when when I have the time." It's important to have those appointments on the calendar where you're activating things that bring you joy. Now, during this pandemic, the research is clear. There was greater sales of alcohol. There was tripling the amount of sadness, tripling the amount of anxiety. People had to withdraw from interacting with others. So there wasn't this opportunity to experience this joy. And so making sure activating things and experiencing different things. A lot of people started doing different things to experience joy that were healthy. And that doesn't stop just because maybe you got the vaccine now, you're feeling better. Maybe uh, you don't have to be as careful as before, but it doesn't mean not experiencing joy or activating yourself, both your mind and body, to experience joy. C stands for celebrate. Celebrating means, especially in healthcare, during this time of grief and loss, how do we celebrate? How do we celebrate each other? How do we celebrate ourselves? Everybody, especially nurses on the front line, need to celebrate their contribution. You have a nurse friend, thank them. They should be thanking you. Celebrate others. That positive emotion, that capacity to experience and express positive emotion really is an enormously healthy thing. Most of the research these days, published research, shows that being able to experience the positive emotions, celebrating others, being compassionate, being grateful, allows one's heart to do better, immune system to work better, brain to work better. So celebrating is important. And then finally, empathically engaging. And this is a message, a theme I think not for the audience that is here today or listening to this. But I think given what's happened this past year in terms of not only the public health trauma, but the social trauma, it is so critical that there be an empathic engagement with others. And I would encourage people to share their perspective with others. I think there is an opportunity for what I would call cultural humility here from those that don't understand the experience um, in this community. And I think that's just so important. And that's why I put those 4 words. And I really do think race is this generation's opportunity to address. I think this generation, the young people, the middle-aged people, the older, it doesn't matter across all backgrounds. This generation must tackle this issue. We must celebrate each other. We must empathically engage. We must solve this for future generations. It's taken too long. And I think here we are, 7.8 billion people in the world have experienced a common event. Over 300 million people in this country have experienced an event. People around the world experienced a similar sense of emotion. And so this is our chance to change the future. And I encourage you to do this as part of your conversations with others. Let me go to the next slide. So, what now? And I think anytime when there are transitions in life, when roles get changed, when experiences get changed, when trauma occurs, people's mindset change. People rethink, what's my real purpose? What do I want to do? What's important to me? How can I make a difference? What do I need to do different? There'll be hundreds of millions of people going through this sort of internal, insightful process. I imagine some of you that are listening today may have had this sort of conversation with yourself, may have had a conversation with a loved one to say, this has changed me. This has made me think differently. I think I know what I want to do. Mindsets change. Maybe this has created greater compassion, greater self-acceptance, greater non-judgmentalness with yourself. I think we in healthcare tend to be too self-critical of ourselves. So maybe this has allowed you to be less self-critical and more accepting of oneself. And all of us may have gotten a little bit older this past year, but I can guarantee you all of us have become a little bit bolder about where we want to go and what we want to do. So my message to you is this is a time, this is the generation that's going to make a difference. This is our chance to be bolder. This is our chance to have a different mindset, a core purpose. And I think those of us that are in healthcare, we can move forward. And nurses, like I said before, you're the heroes. I have no other word for the sacrifice, the courage, and everything that's happened. And so it's been a privilege for me to be here, to be invited to share these thoughts with you, to be able to make these comments. And I'm really looking forward to sort of having the conversation with Dr. Neal. And I know she's got some great questions for me, and I hope I can answer them. But I really do appreciate this opportunity to share these thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Devon. That was phenomenal. And you're absolutely right. We need to reframe our mindset and our way of thinking. And you're absolutely right. I do have some questions for you.
Okay.
So, the very first question, What is the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare professionals handling post-traumatic stress disorder, especially after seeing so many deaths around them on a daily basis?
Yeah, I when I look at the literature and I've talked to professionals,
Mhm.
before this happened, there was this concept of burnout. You know,
Yes.
people were exhausted, cynical, didn't understand their purpose. And for some, this made the burnout worse. For other, it gave them this, okay, I can do this. But
Mhm.
at the same time, the ongoing stress. So what I see when I see organizations, I've done a couple of things, and I hope the people listening here, if they're in these organizations, number one, post shift huddles were
Love
critical.
it. Mhm.
Gotta have that huddle, and it's not the huddle about, hey, you're getting patient number 4 or Mrs. Jones or Mr. Jones in bed 4. It's how you doing, how you feeling, how's it going. I mean, just think about it. If every day we had an emotional check-in, and if it's not being done now, it needs to be done. It needs to be done going forward because we don't get to see each other's facial expressions. You and I can look at each other now and we can chat about this. And we can
Yes.
see our smiles and we can see our nodding. But when you're in a healthcare setting these days, you don't get that same human interaction. So you got to be able to have those verbal conversations about how you doing, how you feeling. And I think organizations and that do that tend to weather the storm of trauma better. And
I
it's being
love
able
it.
to admit, it's just being able to admit, hey, this is tough. I need a break. Being able to, just say, I know I'm strong. I know I'm courageous. I know I can do this. But hey, 1 year? Really? I
And
can't do a marathon for a year.
exactly. Emotional check-in. I love it because it's a very good way of us supporting our coworkers. And I can
Hmm.
see this in any setting, an educational setting, healthcare setting, in any job setting, emotional huddle or emotional check-in. I love it.
Yep.
So I guess my next question would be, what would your advice be for us if we actually notice one of our coworkers depressed? We can
Mm.
see that they are just not the same. They are depressed. Any advice for us?
Um, well, the fact that you recognize something is
Mhm.
is one shows empathy and being able to share to that person, I see you're suffering.
Mhm.
I see you are suffering. I see your pain. Is there something I can do? If the organization has an EAP, hey, let's call the EAP. Let,
Yes.
let's let's get you connected to that EAP. Hey, can I get you something? You want me to come over and chat? You don't have to tell me everything. I'm here for you. And I think those two things, saying,
Mhm.
I see you suffering, how can I
Yes.
help? And then I'm here for you, let me be with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Wow. Feeling that connectedness is empowering to people, and being able to say to them, it's okay. Call for help. Help is there. That's critical.
One thing I love what you said, the fact that you even noticed there was a problem, because most people are trying to hide it. Oh, I'm fine, everything is good. But yet you notice something. So
Hmm.
therefore, you're trying to make a difference for a positive impact. So thank you. I love it. So one of my coworkers gave me this question, and
Mm.
they were concerned about the possible mental health consequences in patients with COVID-19. People who actually
Oh,
have had COVID-19, how does that affect them mentally that they had it,
yes.
as far as long-term effects?
Now, there are situations where people who have been, say, in the ICU a very long time, where
Yes.
you have long term lung impact You
Mm.
could have long-term what's called neurocognitive impact because there's their oxygen states. Some have
Yes.
had what's called encephalopathies,
Mm-hmm.
chronic organ failure. So you have to think there could be some cognitive problems down the road. There could
Mm-hmm.
be some emotional dysregulation problems down the road. So that's what I call the long-term stays. The
Yes.
short-term stays, not as much that I've seen, not as much. But once again, it's a anytime there's a hospitalization, it's a traumatic, grief-stricken event. It impacts people. It might be a mild depression. It might be a mild anxiety. It might be a moderate depressive syndrome, but it's something that you might need treatment for. So I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see neurocognitive issues moving
Yes.
forward, especially people that say have had the hemorrhages or the little strokes that have happened with COVID, because it's
Mm-hmm.
such a it has tremendous impact. So it's not only the lung, the kidneys, you know, the clotting, the brain. So a multi-system impact, and I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll know the long-term effects. But that's my best guesstimate right now.
Thank you. It kind of reminds me of soldiers when they go to war and they come back with post-traumatic stress disorders. That's the long-term effect of it, of course. But
Hmm.
then the caregivers would have to deal with it. So my follow-up question would be, if you feel this is something that we will see in the future with the long-term effects of the people being in ICU, what advice would you give for those caregivers? Because the caregivers will have to deal with that individual who changed. They are no longer the same healthy breadwinner or person they once were,
Mm.
as a result of being sick with COVID, being in a hospital for a long time. And my analogy is the same as the military soldier who goes to war and now he comes back and he's not the same. So what would your advice be for the caregivers or that spouse or that child or sister or brother or sibling?
I think probably a couple of things. Number one, frequent follow-ups. Okay, frequent follow-ups with the healthcare professional, meaning let's make sure we monitor the physical issues. Let's make
Yes.
sure we monitor the cognitive issues. Let's make sure we monitor the mental issues. Some of those may pass. Some of those
Mhm.
may reduce over time, but it's making sure the monitoring is going on. Because I'll
Yeah.
tell you one thing: when this pandemic happened, I knew doctors that would be learning every day, nurses every day.
Yes.
This is the approach that's going to make this better. Oh, there's been reports in the East Coast. There's been reports in Europe that here's the syndrome that happened. Here's the treatment. So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be an explosion of knowledge, just like there was an explosion of knowledge during this year. There's going to
Yes.
be an explosion of knowledge over the next 5, 10 years. And that's why it's important to follow up, because that knowledge is going to be sent to healthcare professionals, and it's going to be around the world. And so they'll be able to notice, hey, I just read an article that said 6 months out, here's what you should expect. Let's
Right.
check on that. Or 12 months out, a study just got published. Here's what we should expect. Let's check that. So I think those are the kinds of things. That's why you have to stay connected to the health system, because the knowledge will tell us what to do next. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you. I agree. Being up to date with evidence-based practice protocols is so important. So that brings me to the healthcare professionals, because healthcare professionals, how do we deal with mass fatigue? I
Uh,
mean, most healthcare professionals work a 12-hour shift. Some
yeah.
doctors work a 24-hour shift or a 36-hour shift. What would your advice be for mass fatigue? I mean, most people doing an 8-hour shift, they can go home and take it off. But when you're doing a 12-hour shift, what's your advice
Yeah.
on that?
I Boy, let me go back to that slide I showed you. Please rest during your shift. Okay. I
Yes.
every shift,
Hmm.
there is opportunity. Every shift there's opportunity. So if you're not, I mean, even sprinters, even marathon runners,
Hmm.
you don't speed the whole 26 miles or 25
Hmm.
miles. There's
Yes.
some slow laps, there's some fast laps,
Hmm.
and that's how you prevent the exhaustion. And then obviously, you know, people think that they're needed. They're the most needed person on the planet and they have to be at work. Well, the reality is no.
Right.
I know you're a hero. I know you're a hero for doing this. I know it's important for you to do this. I know it feels great that you're serving others, but for you to continue being the hero, be a hero to yourself and
Yes.
take some rest. Okay? That's my message to people.
I love the meshes. It makes me think of when you're taking care of any patients, but I think of Alzheimer's patients
Mm.
and caregivers because you can really, it's a 365 day. I mean, you really can become burned out, but you're only as good, that person is only as good as he is if you take care of yourself. So if you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to
That's
take care of
right.
that Alzheimer's patient? So you really
So
need
right.
to think about yourself first so that you can take care of the patient. So I get that. So now you're talking about 6 months out. You really got me thinking, Dr. Dewan. So
Okay.
yeah, 6 months out with this, with everything that's going on, we are dealing with. Let's face it, we're dealing with a certain degree of vaccine hesitancy, and we're
Mhm.
dealing with a certain degree of trust or lack of trust. How can we deal with that?
Ah, well, all right. This is a, here we are. This was the most rapid scientific project in the history of medicine. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't, and I think it was the quickest because of all the work over the last decade. The scientists, the engineers, the the innovators in
Yes.
biotech were ready. They were ready, which is amazing to me. And
Right.
and I think and the when people think, oh, the this vaccine got created too quickly, I remember people were lining up to be, hey, I want to help society, I want to help the world, yes, I want to be in this trial. Now most clinical trials, it takes months and months and months to enroll people. I have
Right.
never seen so many people volunteer, say, yeah, I want to be a volunteer, I want to save humanity. Because many months ago it was like, is this the end? What's going to happen? There was such fear in people,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
those that didn't get it said, "Look, I'm going to volunteer." So we had thousands and thousands and thousands of people volunteer around the world. So we had innovators, we had volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and we needed quick data. And 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 now we have multiple interventions, and some of them, they all work. They all work. Okay.
Yes.
It's the percentages that don't give what I would call, you might still get some mild problems, say with
Mm-hmm.
some of the vaccines. Some of them have 94, 95%, hey, no problems at
Mm-hmm.
all. Some of them
Yes.
74%, 65%, no problem at all. But they all are like, you know, and the most recent one where it was so unfortunate, you know, 6 or 7 out of like 7 million. I mean, it's still scary. It's scary to people. So when you see that number, you're like, I don't want to be that statistic. I know that's a real rare thing, but I don't want to be that. We look at harm and benefit differently. If I said you had a 1 in a million chance of winning the lottery, you'd say, give me the ticket. But
Right.
if I said you had a 1 in a million chance of having a really bad side effect, I don't want it. So it's a real different thing when there's a potential for harm. There's a different thought process that goes on. And you really, that's why I leave it up to people that, hey, just think about the pros and cons here. Think about what you're going to give up, what you're going to gain, and have that
Mhm.
thoughtful conversation with your doctor about this. That's what I recommend to people.
Well, thank you. So, that automatically makes me want to come up with the question about Johnson and Johnson
Oh, okay.
vaccine. Could you please tell me why you feel that it seems like they're really pushing the Johnson and Johnson vaccine in low-income communities?
Uh,
Why?
y- okay. So as you know, a lot of the other vaccines needed this refrigeration, this the real cold refrigeration.
Right,
Okay,
right, right, right.
and you needed the two shots. Okay, so refrigeration or specialty refrigeration in two shots. That means you had to have a healthcare infrastructure. Okay,
Yes,
to have these fancy refrigerators, and you had to have available transportation. The sad part is that in communities of color, the healthcare infrastructure is not as robust and
mhm,
transportation is not there. So initially this was like, oh my goodness, this is so great. We we
yeah,
we we have these what I would call healthcare infrastructure deficits. But
yes,
now we have an intervention that we don't have to worry about those unfortunate, sad deficits. And so I think that's why that was done. So,
okay.
and I
So,
wish and I wish this side effect would not have happened.
yes,
It's
that
just
was my next
terrible.
question.
Uh,
Yeah,
because it would have been it would have been it it would have been a contribution to society for it not to have had these side effects because it addressed those unfortunate and sad infrastructure deficits that are inherent and those
yes.
disparities in healthcare infrastructure uh, that are obvious in certain communities. So
That is
that's
true.
my comment on that.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question about trust. Do you have any advice on how we could? It's really hard going into some communities when they are thinking back to historical of things that happen as far as a mistrust of the healthcare system. So, could you give
Mm,
us some advice of how we could um, dismiss those trusts or how we can change their
uh,
thinking or reframe their thinking?
well, I think trust is built through repeated interactions
Yes.
and transparent and honest
Mhm.
and appropriate follow through interactions. So for me, rebuilding trust is it's the job of it, it's not the job of the person who's not trusting to rebuild trust. It's the
Yes.
other it's the opposite party to say, let me be completely transparent. I'm going to promise you X on such and such date, and I will
Yes.
deliver on such and such date. And I want
Yes.
you to hold me accountable for this. So I think
Mhm.
trust is a matter of of repeated, accountable, honest transactions. And that's how
Right.
you rebuild trust. You can't just rebuild trust by saying, trust me. That doesn't work.
No, it definitely doesn't. So I guess my final question would be, what do you think, how do you think the healthcare system is going to change once we reach herd immunity? How do you think everything is going to change? Or do you think we're not really going to have a major change? Maybe we still have to wear masks. Maybe every year we would have to get a flu vaccine and a COVID vaccine. What do you
Those
think the
are,
change?
I, I think there's going to be new information about mask wearing. Okay.
Mhm.
I think there is. So I think that's definitely going to change. Okay. The
Yes.
longevity, the longevity of what I would call the protection of the
Hmm.
vaccine
Yes.
is some researchers are saying a year, some researchers are
Mm.
saying greater than. I don't know
Okay.
the answer to that. I think it's going to be around a year. I think that makes sense. Um,
Hmm.
and but I tell you, for me, does it mean that every October I have to start wearing a mask? Or every,
Exactly.
on the anniversary of my, we are going through this, some people, if you get vaccinated, January through say June, does that mean 1 year later on my anniversary of my shot, I have to start wearing masks because now I'm susceptible?
Exactly.
Those are the unanswered questions.
Yes.
That's what makes this so difficult because, you know, what are we going to tell people? What are we going to say? Hey, watch your clock,
Exactly.
look at the appointment, look at your calendar. Does that mean different parts of the society have to be, more protected or less protected? That we don't know the answer. That's what I'm waiting for the science to tell us. In the meantime, at a minimum, we know this is going to give us at least 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get vaccinated. Let's get this herd immunity so we can have some change in how we live our lives. Open things up again, feel connected to others. And if we can do that, the science will let us know. I mean, I'm just amazed by the scientific breakthroughs. And,
Yes.
this is better than going to the moon. This was better than
Yes.
going to the moon
Yeah.
because if you could imagine somebody said, hey, in a year from now, we got to go to the moon, from nothing. And, and it happened. It happened.
Yeah.
It's not only one rocket went to the moon, 7 rockets. I mean, that's to me is amazing. That's the beauty of science. So,
It is. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And I want to give you the final word. What would you like to leave our audience with? A final piece of knowledge from you. What would that be?
oh, look, I think this has been a year of courage. It's And I am hopeful that the next year will bring hope and healing. And I think this generation is ready to chart a new course. And that is my wish. And once again, it's really been a privilege for me to be with you all, to be invited to this event. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Dr. Dewan. We just want to say thank you to Florida Blue and thank you also to dedicated medical senior centers for making this possible. We want to say thank you to the HC Multicultural family for being able to produce all of our videos and creating our YouTube channel. So we want to say thank you to our sponsors. And more than anything, I love what you said. Reframe your thinking. Take time out for you to rest, celebrate each other, and celebrate yourself. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
You've been watching a production made by Chrome Media Group. For more information, go to chromemultimedia.com.